right next to it.
Yeah.
Do you want? Also trade. All right.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Try again. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good
Is it a
afternoon.
kind of good afternoon? Real whoo-hoo. Thank you, Elly. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Dean. That was one of our beloved Elly's requests. She also requested that this be a God-free zone and a Lord-free zone. So I want you to know we'll be using all of Elly's heart language for holiness today. And I invite you and implore you to do the same. Today we gather as family and friends of Eleanor, Elly, Ruth Wagner, in the protective shelter of the goddess's healing love. Here we are free to share our grief however it manifests and rest in the holy love that holds us through all of it. We gather to be holy hands of comfort and support to one another. And we gather also to celebrate Elly's magnificent life, to give thanks for the gift of knowing and loving her. We pray this with sighs too deep for human words, with tears and with laughter, for the peace Elly spent her life practicing, protesting for, and pursuing. We pray for blessings from memories and an awareness of Elly's presence with us as she enters the communion of saints, that great cloud of witnesses that accompany us even now. In the company of so many who loved her, we gather to say a collective farewell to, as Elly would, compost our grief into a love that can continue to transform the world as Elly dreamed. As we sing now together, we lift up our hearts to the source of all healing, our great Mother Spirit Sustainer.
And in that request, is it on?
Can you turn the volume up on this?
And in that, whoa, hello. In that request, if you look at the second page of the song, One Slip By Us. And so it's going to be, and love is goddess of heaven and earth. So when you get there, just remember Elly and sing goddess.
If you feel led, please feel free to stand in or rise in heart, spirit, or body if you feel led.
This. Dude, turn out. Turn off. Oh, okay. Off. Okay. It's off. Okay, you're using.
Psalm 139.
Yeah, this is clear.
Holy
Oh,
One,
that's clear.
you
Yeah.
have searched me and known me. You know when I sit
That's it.
down and when I rise up.
No, you pick.
Discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, Goddess, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O Spirit. How vast is the sum of them. I tried to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you.
Oh, here it is. Can I? Thank you. Now I can see the people too. This is so cool. Can I watch it up here? Because downstairs I.
Sorry.
Wait, is it? Oh,
That's weird. This is a song that me and my family would sing to Grandma eh, most nights to help her get to sleep. And we would like to sing it for you. Be still, my soul, for love is song, your song, with patience bear thy cross of grief and pain. Lead to
Amen. Will you pray with me? Be still our souls. Help us to relax into the energy of life and connectedness and the beloved earth for which Elly cared so much. Amen. As I prepared for today's service, I went through my pictures from the last 5 years, combed through emails, and read sermons, Lynn Daly columns, and meeting minutes, each that were either by or about Elly. I'm feeling like the sound is it kind of hard to hear? It's too loud. Can we turn it down just a little bit? Let's try that. It's okay? All right, we're gonna have to live in compromise. I guess that's what it means to be in community. So anyway, I read through all of these things either about or by Elly. EllyRW@AOL.com appears thousands of times in my own AOL account. There are hundreds of Elly's Rejoice and Honor columns from the Lyndale newsletter. And there are dozens of pictures from many, if not most, of the protests, vigils, parades, and actions that Lyndale and the Center for Sustainable Justice have participated in. 3 snapshots struck me. We're in the garden sanctuary in the Spring House building, and the choir is standing in a couple of curved lines behind the piano. Elly has on a blue long sleeve shirt and a scarf that matches with blue patterns. She is singing second soprano and I alto. We are standing next to each other. Her head is tilted slightly to one side, and she is singing lyrics that we've edited to be more inclusive. She is expressively articulating the words and swaying rhythmically to the music. I can hear our tones weaving together in harmony as the tenors and basses behind us and the sopranos beside us help us swell the sound. My life flows on, an endless song above earth's lamentations. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. The second snapshot. We are inside the barely air-conditioned home on whose floor all 14 of us have been sleeping in the middle of the Cheyenne River Reservation on a sweltering July day. We are there on a solidarity trip to be with our Lakota friends and colleagues. We have been making quilts to be used in a grief ritual and helping build a corral for the suicide prevention's program's horses. It is evening, and Elly is leading us in our daily reflections and prayer, guiding us using robin wall kimmerers braiding sweetgrass. And she reads to us. After all these generations since Columbus, some of the wisest native elders still puzzle over the people who came to our shores. They look at the toll on the land and say, the problem with these new people is that they don't have both feet on the shore. One is still in the boat. They don't seem to know whether they're staying or not. Elly continues reading from Kimmerer. Maybe the task assigned to second man is to strive to become naturalized to place, to throw off the mindset of the immigrant. Being naturalized to place means to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink, that build your body and fill your spirit. Here, you will give your gifts and meet your responsibilities. To become naturalized, to live as if your children's future matters. To take care of this land, as if our lives and the lives of all our relatives depend on it, because they do. The third snapshot. My daughter Shannon is 9, and Elly asks her if she would like to preach together about being vegetarian for Earth Week. They spend time together talking about what they might say, offering suggestions for the rest of the service, including a piece of music that they sing together. And then they preach. Elly standing at one pulpit on one side of the South Sanctuary at Springhouse, and Shannon at the other. And Elly shares the following. I feel so fortunate to have grown up in such a beautiful world. And I want there to be a beautiful, sustainable world for my children and grandchildren to live in. I believe I am called to care for creation, not have dominion over it, as the older translations of Genesis 1:26 say. The translation we read today is from a UCC Neighbors in Need publication. Let us make human beings in our image, make them reflecting our nature so that they can be responsible for the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, the cattle, and yes, earth itself, and every animal that moves on the face of the earth. Elly goes on, not eating meat or possibly any animal products is something I can do every day to make a difference. Elly Wagner was a pillar at Lyndale United Church of Christ. She was a church lady. Elly was a cultivator of gardens and of community. She loved her family deeply. She was a woman of deep faith. She sought to be a peacemaker, and although often discouraged, she never gave up. Elly's spiritual and theological life was constantly growing as she questioned, learned, and changed. For instance, as Reverend Ashley mentioned, in preparation for this service, she reminded each of us every single time we saw her in the last few months of her life that she didn't want any mention of God, Lord, or Father. Instead, she asked that the sacred energy be referred to as Holy One, or Goddess, or Spirit. For me, this is such a lovely example of her curious, questioning self. No matter her age, Elly kept playing with how the language she employed for the Holy One reflected her deep sense of being connected with the web of life. She kept asking how her values and beliefs were as consistently aligned with her actions and her living as possible. As Elly was dying, one of her biggest griefs was that she didn't have enough time to do all that she felt called to do. She worried a lot about her legacy. And one of the things we tried to assure her of was that we would carry on for her. I know I have thought a lot about Elly and her legacy. Although I am one of Elly's pastors, I have also been mentored by Elly too. And along with so many of you here, I've also collaborated and marched with her, harmonized with her in song, and listened and been inspired by her. She was an out lesbian and paved a path which I and many of us have been privileged to walk on. And so as we contemplate Elly's legacy and our vow to help continue it, I wonder how we might have both feet on this shore, how we might be naturalized to this beautiful place and protect the waters and the trees. I wonder how we might root ourselves in the searching and knowing of the Holy One and live in ways that hearken to the reality that all of creation is fearfully and wonderfully made. How might we rejoice in and honor beloved community, tending it like a garden? And how we might, even a little bit more, eat some vegan food and keep marching and singing. May the goddess, the Holy One, the Spirit, the sacred energy receive our beloved Elly into her arms so that she may rest in peace and rise in power. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Rebecca. That was a beautiful tribute. I'm Paul Wagner, Elly's little brother. Keith and I are going to bring you a brief sketch of her life as we knew her, and also recount some stories from memoirs created mainly through the efforts of her grandchild, Turin Burdick, whom you'll hear more from shortly. Elly and I were born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh was called the Smoky City back then, full of steel mills, coke ovens, and all sorts of heavy manufacturing. But we lived on a quiet street in the suburbs, and it was close to Father's work. He designed power transformers for the electrical grid. When Elly was 5, we moved from Pittsburgh to the little coal mining town of Houston, Pennsylvania. We then had the pleasant life of a small town, albeit with a few rough edges, as it served a coal mining community, of course. There were also farms, university, and fine churches there as well. So it had a distinctly pastoral side to it. And Houston was nearly a suburb of Pittsburgh, so we still had all the cultural and economic advantages of a big city. Pittsburgh had a Carnegie Hall, museums, playhouses, and expansive natural parks. Our parents would take us into Pittsburgh to cultural and art events. Elly later recalled one of her favorite memories as a child was being thrilled by the experience of going to Shakespeare's Cleopatra at a playhouse in the big city. By that time, there were 4 of us children. As she was sandwiched between me and my older sister, Lois, I was probably a real pain in her neck. I've been reminded of instances of teasing her at that age. That's what little brothers are for. But she was a forgiving and caring sister to me. During our grade school years in Houston, Elly and I shared many adventures together. She had already developed a love of nature and wildlife and generously let me accompany her and her best friend on neighborhood hikes. One I recall was an enchanting, secluded little spring with fragrant mint and wildflowers around it, which she had dubbed Fairyland. This is a relatively unknown remote spot she would often visit to great delight. In later years, while Elly and I were reflecting on our childhood, we were struck by the relative danger in many of the places our adventures took us as children. It's a wonder we made it. Some of these hikes were relatively risky. Even her beautiful Fairyland involved hiking on a busy trolley track, and we would sit on the tracks in the narrow ravine that enclosed her 7th wonder. Elly remembered her older sister and I as being the daredevils of the group, though, with her standing guard while I climbed on swinging bridges and rocks, but she would be there ready to help if calamity occurred. She loved cats and had them for pets from a very young age. She became an active Girl Scout, with her mother taking her often to local scouting events. One of her fondest memories was when she went to Girl Scout Camp Riamo in Pennsylvania at age 9, and for several years thereafter. She remembered it being exciting, but got homesick at times. I recall riding in the car when we took her to and from the camp, having to endure her exuberant singing. We're going to Camp Riamo, Riamo, Riamo. Music was a big thing in our family. Elly played flute, ukulele, later guitar, and was a good singer, as you know. She enjoyed playing her flute in the high school marching band, marching in parades, and at football games. We went on family vacations together almost every summer. We'd gone to Niagara Falls, inland lakes, the Atlantic Ocean, and state parks. Several times, our father rented a big beachfront cottage on the banks of Lake Erie. We would invite relatives and friends of all ages and crowd together there and have a wonderful time. I remember Elly would even take her cat along on that one. Even on vacations, our parents believed in allowing us to go out on adventures. We would go out in boats by ourselves, even on open Lake Erie. And while still in high school, Lois and Elly took an automobile trip with just some of their high school friends to visit relatives around surrounding states. From the time we were kids, I was already in awe of her energy and accomplishments. I remember her high school science fair projects that challenged my understanding of science. She built an electronic binary readout device foreshadowing the digital computer revolution, back when few knew or cared what a computer was. And she built a working model of a fuel cell, then an almost unknown electrical generating device that became, of course, one of the key pieces in enabling man to go to the moon. I don't know where she got such vision. Even our father, a remarkable electrical engineer, didn't concern himself with such developments back then. I think the engineering community suffered a loss when she decided to go into audiology instead of engineering. But that's another story. I'll let Keith fill you in on that one in a few minutes. As we started our families and careers and moved to different parts of the country, Elly and I didn't stay in close touch for what would have been an enriching adult relationship. And that developed later, I'm glad to say. I remember hearing about her awareness of things that needed courageous people to take action. Her trips into the teeth of the violent civil rights movement, later women's rights, gay rights, climate change, and war protests now humble me in my existence. By comparison, I was standing on the periphery of society. There are many other causes she embraced, and through each of one, I could never imagine any of us Wagners having that kind of courage. But beside the activism side of her life, she was always there for any of us that needed help. I remember a trip that my wife Patty and I took to the mountains, planning a pleasant visit with Elly on our return from Colorado. Elly had helped us in previous years, obtaining the best possible hearing aids for Patty's difficult hearing loss. But that year, the high altitude travel had made Patty's hearing even much worse. When we visited Elly in Minnesota, she took us to her audiologist's office, made adjustments to Patty's hearing aids using the latest state-of-art equipment and techniques, and restored her hearing to a remarkable degree. No audiologist before or since has done such an effective job of restoring Patty's hearing. When Keith heard about it, he probably said, "Mom to the rescue." Keith, I'd like to turn it over to you.
That's a tough act to follow. Thanks, Paul. And thanks to all of you for coming today, whether here in person or on Zoom, to celebrate Elly's amazing life. We really appreciate your being here. I want to also give a special thanks to those who helped with Elly's care during the end of her life, sometimes traveling ways through traffic, always providing a helping hand, and raising Elly's spirits. Thanks so much specifically to Anne, Sarah, Darla, and Nancy for all that you did during that difficult time. I'll talk about Elly's life from college onward. To attend college, she traveled west to Worcester, Ohio to study at the liberal arts college there. A big decision there was when she changed her major from math to speech, kind of like Paul alluded to. At the time, as I understand it, she was thinking about being a math teacher, and changing her major to speech set her on the track to become an audiologist, which, as we've heard, and as I'll talk a little more about, was a godsend to many people. I mean, a sent from the Creator, the Holy One. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, when she graduated from the College of Worcester, she got a Studebaker. It's a car that's kind of hard to come by these days, and I don't know where the Studebaker ended up, but Elly ended up going further west, actually much further west, to grad school at the University of Washington. From there, she transferred to the University of Illinois, eventually to the Chicago campus. And that was a big moment since she really liked Chicago, decided to stay in Chicago after graduating, and has lived here in the Midwest ever since. One thing that started in Chicago was her activism. It was then, after the famous march from Selma to Montgomery, that she made the courageous decision to join other young men and women going down to Montgomery, Alabama, to register voters. On that trip, she heard the Reverend Martin Luther King speak, and she was so impressed, really not just with him, but with the courage of the Black people there who risked great harm in order to make a difference, in order to make the world a better place, that she returned to Chicago with a new sense of purpose. She also returned to Chicago, having learned some new songs, learned many freedom songs, and she and her friends Melinda Hunter and Kathy Bogie formed a musical group called the Gypsies. They played concerts for the single group that they were all part of. Her love of music shone through, not just in the songs she picked for the Gypsies, but throughout the rest of her life. Now, when you imagine this singles group, you might be thinking of a group that could fit in someone's apartment. Not so. This group, known as the Northies, was nearly 500 people, big enough to publish their own newspaper. And one thing Elly did in this group that I never really knew about was she directed a play. This was another creative talent. Paul mentioned Shakespeare, and Elly was a scholar of the theater. And she still had tucked away in her house many of these scripts, Shakespeare, and several copies of the production she did with this singles group. They put on a production of J.B. that they performed twice. Once in Chicago and once in Green Lake, Wisconsin. And that second production was outdoors during a torrential downpour. And I'm told that the actors had to shout out their lines just to be heard. I was kind of braced for that today, but I guess the storms are going to hold off till tonight. So thankful for the good weather here. As you may know, during her time in Chicago, she also started her audiology career and got married. She and my father soon moved here to Minneapolis, settling in Edina, where Elly lived for 50 years. I have to kind of stop reading here and kind of go off script for this, because at that time in her life was kind of a sad time for Elly, and she had sad times in her life, and I guess I wanted to talk about that. I wrote here that during that time she felt shrouded in silence, and that happened at other times too, including at the end of her life. Of course, I think anyone would feel sad at the diagnosis she received, that she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And we all know and love her sunny disposition. And I think especially at the end, it was really masking a deep sadness. I think Rebecca talked about this feeling she had that she ran out of time. She did have that sadness. She felt troubled by the forethought of death, and I feel inspired by the courage that she showed during the last year and a half while she was troubled by that, how courageous she was, and virtually every time I talked to her. I could just give thanks that for all the kindness she received from so many of you, and hope that that echoed in her soul during that time. So thank you all. Returning to Elly's life, can't litter here during a memorial for Elly Wagner. Returning to Elly's life, she decided that being a housewife was not the right fit. She had been an audiologist in the 60s, and now she was an audiologist in the 70s, 80s, 90s, aughts, and teens, and working at Park Nicollet for more than 40 years. One anecdote, that when she was in the hospital just 3 months ago, something amazing happened. A nurse from another department came in. I think his name was Patrick. He wanted to see if she was the Eleanor Wagner, the audiologist, because as he put it, she had saved his hearing when he was a young boy by diagnosing the cause of his earaches. I was just so impressed that he remembered her and that she made such a difference in his life. And that's just one example out of all the people that she helped. She spent a lot of her professional life working with tinnitus, patients with ringing in their ears. In minor cases, of course, that's not a big deal, but in severe cases, it can be very debilitating. And I was struck by how one of her colleagues said that these patients require the most perseverance, patience, and education. And I'm struck by, in addition to all the people that she helped to hear, she helped a whole nother group of people by teaching them not to hear the ringing in their ears. She said recently that she never got tired of audiology and that she liked it because it required an equal combination of technical skills and people skills. And she certainly had both of those. And through all of this, she was a fantastic mother. She was a hockey mom, a den mother, a tireless advocate for a better curriculum at school, and 1,000 other things. She stood by Glidewell and I through all of our challenges and always believed in us. Just a few short examples. On my hockey teams, I was one of the only kids with glasses. So playing hockey outdoors during a Minnesota winter, one of the first things that would happen is my glasses would fog up. Now, playing hockey when you can't see is hard. Actually, it's rather dangerous. So she found just the right anti-fog lens cleaner. And as a result, I survived my hockey games without serious bodily harm. Another example, as a child, my brother was in the hospital for a leg fracture. It must have been around this time of year because I remember he had grown a huge pumpkin in the garden, of which he was quite proud. He had been looking forward to the huge jack-o'-lantern it could become, but like I said, he was stuck in the hospital. So here's what Elly did. After carving this pumpkin into a jack-o'-lantern, she got this huge pumpkin into the back of the car, found which part of the hospital parking lot was visitable from his hospital room, and lit up the jack-o'-lantern in the parking lot on Halloween night so that he could see it from his window. And then one other example that meant so much to me was that as a teenager, when I decided to become a vegetarian, she was very supportive and cooked vegetarian meals for me. She did that at the time out of kindness to me, but when she became concerned about climate change, as Rebecca mentioned, she herself became a vegetarian and went a step further than I did by becoming a vegan. Climate change was just one issue where she felt moved to take action. Another was LGBTQ rights. In a courageous move, she came out as a lesbian in the 80s. And maybe this goes without saying, but that was much more difficult to do then than it is to today. Things are different today, and one of the reasons we've made that progress is because of people like Elly. Hard as it was, she felt it was important to take a stand, not just for herself, but to pave the way for those who follow. And of course, she took up other causes as well. I mentioned that she took up climate change. She did that years ago. She was ahead of the curve. She was also an anti-war activist. She marched on Washington against the war in Iraq and was a member of the Grandmothers for Peace, not just in name, but actively passing peaceful values to her grandchildren. The list of her causes goes on. Another list that goes on is her creative pursuits. She poured her heart into her book of affirmations for gays and lesbians, Lavender Reflections. Gardening was a passion of hers, and she collected quite a few vases to hold the flowers that she loved. In fact, all the floral centerpieces here today are in Elly's vases, And we invite you to take one home with you, including the flowers, as a keepsake. So definitely feel free to do that. She was also accomplished at many other things: photography, crafts such as cat toys. She still had a huge bag of catnip in her house that we could probably distribute some of that too for people are in need. She would write cookbooks, sell herbs and her freshly baked bread at the Hopkins Farmers Market, of which she was president for many years. All of these talents could merit a discussion on their own, but in the interest of time, I'll close out the life sketch and now speak a little bit more philosophically. On her refrigerator, she kept a magnet that said merely, "Nevertheless, she persisted." If you don't know the backstory there, ask around. I'm sure you'll find some here who do. A common thread in her life was her persistence. So that quote fits her to a T, but I'd add one more quote. The author Tobias Wolff said, "We are made to persist. That's how we find out who we are." And that, in many cases, is how Elly found out who she was. Whatever happened, good or bad, it was made better, or at least more bearable, by her knowing who she was. To the many candidates one could list for her magnum opus, her book, Lavender Reflections, her many other creative endeavors, her ideology, her social justice activism, I would submit another candidate, that her magnum opus was simply herself, and that her great work was that she found out exactly who she was before the world was ready for it, and followed that unique road that corresponded to Elly for 80 years with reckless abandon. About 7 or 8 years ago, I had the chance to join her at lunch with a couple of her fellow seniors. One of the other seniors conceded that the next generation was going to need to solve some big problems, that it was time to pass the baton. My mom responded enthusiastically, "Oh, I'm just getting started." And that was true in a literal sense. Rather than retiring from activism, she was tireless in her 70s, active in many organizations and going to Washington for the Women's March. But as I mentioned before, she was heartsick, that she felt she ran out of time. So I want to address that. The influence a person has on the world has been likened to a pebble landing in water, sending circular waves outward. In my imagining of this metaphor, I see Elly on the edge of Lake Superior, her beloved North Shore, tossing small pebbles and large rocks alike into the water. Some of the waves created have traveled far by now. Some have a ways to go. I think you can imagine the things we have a ways to go on until we have an equal society, until we have a healthy planet with a stable climate, until we have a peaceful world. Those waves still have a ways to go. So the waves that Elly created in her 80 years are still traveling. And yes, Mom, you are still, as we sit here today, just getting started. I'll end in her own words from the last letter she wrote to her grandkids. Your love to me, your love for me has meant so much. And I'm so impressed with your wonderful creativity, artistic skills, and love of nature. I am very concerned about global warming and have done what I could to turn that around. But I have great confidence that you and other young people like Greta Thunberg will be able to do more than I have been able to do. I have had a wonderful life living on this beautiful planet, and I want the same for you. I wish you happiness, wonderful adventures, and the realization that you are making a difference in the world. Finally, let me play a video of Elly putting it more succinctly than that still. So you may have to crane your necks a little bit or turn around if you're here in person, if you want to see this video. I'm going to bring the microphone over here, trying to.
Still touches me. It had a big picture of the globe, and it said, "Don't let the world break your heart." And it was like, that wasn't about the war particularly. It was just, still remember the sign that still touches me. It had a big picture of the globe, And it said, don't let the world break your heart. And it was like, that wasn't about the war particularly. It was just, you know, things are bad, but keep going. Don't give up. Still remember the sun.
Hello, I'm Turin, Elly's grandson. You probably know me, but I wrote this poem. It's called The Thunder of Grief. It's called The Thunder of Grief, and I wrote it shortly after my grandma's passing. So I think the weather mourned you too. It had to save the feelings just like me, for it was too soon. To let them all come spilling out was something that I couldn't bear. So I stay in math class sitting quietly, silently in my chair. To push those letters out my brain, out the window I will stare, waiting for the sun to sink so I could finally care. The wind whipped my windows and lightning pierced the air. Rain shattered on my body, but no pain could compare to the one I felt inside my mind because I knew she wasn't there. She would be absent from her chair, not in the garden, nurturing it when the plants were bare, away from the airport where she would arrive on planes to hug us and see us with love and stories to share. Like how she went to Iceland and almost got lost at sea. She marched with people screaming for freedom and liberty. And most importantly, she cared for all in need, bringing flowers and love to people just like me, who sit shaking, crying, but I don't have her to visit while I shed my tears. She is departed, having spent all of her years. On this gorgeous planet she fought so hard to protect, I will continue her legacy and I will save what is left. I will remember her kindness as the thunder screams in my ear, and I'll remember the things she did when she was still here.
Kathy.
Thank you very much for that, Turin. As you have just heard her life story, and many of you have experienced with Elly personally, she was a woman of many passions. She was a seeker of political truth. She believed in treating all with love, respect, and support. She loved our planet and wanted to preserve it for her beloved children and grandchildren. Elly was a lover, an adventurer, a spreader of fun and joy. So in true Elly style, I get to share some joy and fun and read one of her many writings. Okay, so the writing that we chose was Never Been Done, Eleanor Wagner, and she wrote it in 2008. After careful thinking, I decided that I wasn't going to spend my life doing what had already been done. Georgia O'Keeffe from 1976. I want to gather courage for blazing a new trail, finding what is alive in me and daring to shout it out loud. Yet in one sense, I have no other choice. I have a song to sing that has echoed through the ages, but never with my voice until now. I see the world through solipsistic eyes. I told everybody I was going to screw up that word, but that make, if new, to all who walk with me. I travel the geography of my soul, sharing the height and depth of its landscape with those who call me sister. So I say, let's blaze a new trail, search our souls as we walk together in our grief and our joy with our sister Elly. I invite anyone to come forward and share a brief story, memory, or testimony about Elly's life and how she touched yours. Love you, Elly. If you are on Zoom, you are invited to type your remembrance into the chat function and it will be read. Thank everybody for sharing.
So if anybody has a memory or a brief story, and if we could err on the side of tweet length as opposed to sermonic length, we'll spend about 10 minutes or so sharing memories. And Ashley's going to read online. Paul, would you like to share?
Thank you. Good afternoon. And I just want to say Elly's presence is here. If you heard the birds and you heard the ringing of the bell, and everything is like in a spiritual realm now. So Elly, nice work. I so appreciate getting to know your family. Turin, incredible. So I am one of the pebbles in Elly's life that is spreading the word of. Elly was a champion in Edina for the project Citizens Climate Lobby, and now Elly's gone. So we're inviting all of you to take her place. Come and see me if you would like to take action. And on Monday night, my wife Mindy and I are leading a Zoom call to replenish the Edina Citizen Climate Lobby chapter. So if you are interested, the world needs you. We need Elly. She's not done. And Elly, I am not letting you off the hook. You need to do your work from the other side to help all of us reach the kind of future that you so dearly loved. So thank you, and come see me if you want to help. I'm easy to find.
Thank you, Paul. Would not be a gathering about Elly without an announcement and a call to action, so that's perfect. Anybody else have a story or a memory they'd like to share? Do we have anything in the chat?
Elly was a very special person, as you all know, and I knew her in many capacities. I took writing workshops with her, and every time she would read her writings, I couldn't believe that she could do something so beautiful in those few minutes. We shared many different things. We're both peace activists, but after knowing her for many years, I had a really, she was also a strong introvert and very humble. And so there were places that we never knew about her, even people who knew her fairly well. So Elly and I had been, and some other people here, were at the Mankato Women's Spirituality Conference for many years. And we closed with either 30 or 35 years, about 5 or 6 years ago. And I did a workshop and I said, anybody who would like, this is not going to be a program, we're going to create our own program. And I'd like people to come who'd like to talk about their memories of these 35 years. And we had a big circle of women. And at least a quarter of the women in that room told stories about Elly. She did, at one of the first workshops there, she did a workshop on lesbianism and spirituality and not having a place in spiritual surroundings. And those women all got up one after another and talked about how Elly had created a safe space for them to be who they really were, where they could be a lesbian and a spiritual person. And that legacy will live on. She did that in so many quiet ways. But for those women, it was the first time they had experienced that. And they've gone on to spread that message. So thank you. Thank you, Elly.
I have a few from the chat. From Pastor Emeritus of Lindale, Don Portwood. This service so beautifully captured Elly. Such gratitude for all she did for Lindale Church, humanity, and for this earth. A memory from Melinda Hunter. I roomed with Elly before I was married. Everything in her apartment was lavender. I didn't really like the color. Today, I've colored my nails lavender in her honor. And from Suzanne Long, Elly was an inspirational spark at our Grandmothers for Peace meetings and at our vigils on the corner.
Anybody else? Darla?
This is probably another example of things that other people didn't see. But when one of our good friends, Kayla, was dying over a period of 4 months, Elly sent her a card every single day. And often one of her own beautiful cards, which shows the kind of person Elly was. Well, then when I heard of Elly's diagnosis, I decided there was no way I could send a card every day, but I could send one once a week. So I did. But in typical Elly fashion, I didn't just send cards. I received cards and wonderful letters back from Elly. So even as she's dying, Elly is still giving in a very, again, not noticeable to everyone, but so meaningful.
Darla was also one of Elly's care team. So deep gratitude, Darla.
Hi, I'm Carla. I'm from the Minnesota Herb Society, and we got to know Elly when I joined the Herb Society, and she was our vice president at one time. She also loved to come out to the gardens, and she took pictures. So some of those lovely pictures on the cards are from the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, where we take care of the herb gardens. She and I and Bonnie and another friend of ours, Gloria, used to do art and bloom. So a floral arranger also is one of Elly's many talents that I've learned about today. Elly and I also did in 2019 a talk. Elly often did talks for our group. One year she did a vegetarianism talk. At our 50th anniversary, she did a talk about rosemary. But she and I put together a green burial speech together. And these herbs that were arranged by our friend Bonnie are some of the funerary herbs. And Elly was in charge of researching that. And so if you notice that it has all of the herbs from there, and we loved Elly, and we are going to miss her just terribly. A group of ours came to tend her gardens last summer, and it was actually not my idea, but it was Nora's idea. And we came, and it was a very tumultuous summer in Minneapolis, if you remember last year. And she was so grateful to us for coming, but we were so grateful to have the opportunity to commune with each other in a beautiful space. And I know that all of us will really miss Elly. So do us.
A couple more online to close this time. From Robert Frame. As I shared with Elly for her birthday, at times I felt overwhelmed with the actions Elly would bring to us to participate in. Always. Every time she arrived at our meeting or a gathering or opportunities to make the world better would arrive with her. Elly seemed never to be overwhelmed. To act is one of the ways that Elly inspired me over these years. I hope I successfully follow Elly to action to the end of my days. And from Keegan online, I just want to share how amazing a presence Elly was. It was an honor to be able to sing for her. And now I think we get a chance to sing for her again. Is that what's next? Oh, we get to hear a little more talking before we get to sing for her. Okay.
Exactly. It's good to be humbled. You're going to hear a little more talking. One of the ways that resurrection happens is through memory. When we remember Elly, when we wonder what she would do, and then we do it. When we pick up a piece of work that has been hers, she lives on in us. Because each of us has known Elly, and because we are here, there is the promise that her life lives on. Each of the stories that have been shared are pieces of her that are still very real, even as she is gone. Part of being here today is to be reminded that death is never an ending. Our lives are interwoven. Elly's deep love of creation does not die with her because she has touched each of us. Her protesting, vigiling, letter writing, peace and justice making do not die with her because she has touched our lives. Her deep belief in family and community do not die with her because she has touched our lives. All of the ways her life is intertwined with ours live on because we carry each of them and have the opportunity to give them life again and again. This is one way that her life yet lives on. This is one way that resurrection happens, because we can continue to give new life to those things that Elly loved. But new life places a claim on us. So I ask you, what part of Elly's life will you carry forth from here? What of her passions and joys? What piece of her will you pass on? What lesson she taught will you embody? What piece of healing will you bring to the world in Elly's honor? Whatever you do, may Elly's memory be for a blessing. Amen. We have one of the original gypsies with us.
Well, it's just so touching and so moving to be here, and yeah, been a friend of Elly's since let's see, it was late 1964, and she was just finishing up on her master's work at UIC, and I was finishing up social work school at the time. And anyway, we met and yeah, maybe I could do this. We met as was described before. It was through a young adult group at the Fourth Presbyterian Church in the city. It's a big city church, and if lots of this group is lots of social activities, and Elly and then Melinda Hunter, the other singer, and I met. We got acquainted very quickly, and Elly, I believe, had recently come back from her experience with voter registration in Selma, Alabama. And that was so impressive. I mean, I had never met anybody who had actually been there, who was actually involved. And it was so real to her. It's just such a natural part of her. And we started with singing civil rights songs that she taught us, brought to us, and because she was very familiar with it. And we sang other kinds of songs too, and romantic songs. We sang Appalachian folk songs, but that was the era of the folk song. And we're not exactly on the level of Joan Baez, but we admired her. Oh, so anyway, then I've kept up with Elly all these years, and just She has remained such an activist, and I'm somewhat of one, but not on the same level as she's been. And just kept in touch with her until she passed. So miss her greatly. Sorry, Melinda was here. She was with Elly when she passed, and she left, and then I came back. So anyway, Jennifer is going to join me with and oh, good.
Yes,
Well, yes, that yes,
And
right.
the music is in your program, so everyone can sing along.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my spirit and be free. No more Jim Crow. No more Jim Crow. No more Jim Crow over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my spirit and be free. There will be singing, there will be singing, there'll be singing over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to spirit and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my spirit and be free.
Thank you.
Hear these words from Elly as a prayer. I celebrate the rainbow in myself and the world. The full spectrum of life calls to me. I no longer see myself in either or terms. I love and hate. I teach and learn. I am a healer and one who is being healed. I am a part of humanity, yet never alone. I change while staying the same. I am living and dying all at once. In this fluid diversity is the beauty of the rainbow. It colors the world and challenges my efforts to harmonize. Respecting who I am, I look forward today to where I will be tomorrow and honor where I have been in the past. In my same-sex orientation, I expand the possibilities for love. My being weaves sparkling threads into the wonderment of the universe. May we always join her in being wonderments of the universe, weaving our lives with her past and into the future she so dreamed. Amen.
If folks would like to rise in mind, heart, or hands and join us in this last hymn, we would love it. don't you stay standing?
And please join with me in our benediction. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember her. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember her. In the blueness of the sky and the warmth of summer, we remember her. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, when we have joys we yearn to share, we remember her. So long as we live, she too shall live, for she is now a part of us as we remember her.